Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And we're on the Miyazaki train now. Wes Anderson has gone very quickly, honestly, compared to especially John Ford, which I'll never get over. But we are starting with the first, now the second feature film of Miyazaki's work, which is Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind. And I have some friends here with me. So I have one of my oldest friends, Haley. Thank you so much for coming on.
Always.
I have Patrice, who is a fellow SiftPop contributor and collaborator here, who comes on and does a lot of Wasteland spotlights on my talk show. So, Patrice, thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me back.
And Patrice is going to be joining the Muppet That Movie segment on my talk show too, which is very exciting.
Very
Which is
excited about that.
honestly one of the most fun things that I do on my talk show because who doesn't love the Muppets? And then we have Rod, who's one of my close friends that I met through Filmstagram and has done plenty of collaborations with, and is a frequent collaborative top five lists of honestly actresses that we love.
Always a pleasure, Shane. Always a pleasure. And look, that was your idea, okay? Dakota Johnson, Emily Blunt, that was all your idea. I was just happy to be a part of it.
Which is funny because we need to figure out the next one, and I'll do that later in the summer.
Yeah, we do.
but but I'm also one of the most fun guests on Rod's podcast because impressions. And we'll just leave it at that. But for those who haven't tuned into the show before, we have three segments. So we are going to start with coming attractions for June 13th, and then we'll get into Nausicaa and then have some recommendations from all of us. And so this weekend is it's prime summer season. It's when a lot of schools are closing. So of course there's a big family-oriented movie that is pissing off all the millennials that saw How to Train Your Dragon in a theater and have loved it. And it's like, why are we remaking this like 14 years or so after this movie came out? But yes, there's How to Train Your Dragon. There is Celine Song's new film Materialists, which you would think seems like a cheesy rom-com based off of the obnoxious trailers that they have coming out for it, but I'm pretty sure it is not. But starring Dakota Johnson, Pedro Pascal, and Chris Evans. And there's a random Western that nobody has heard of except for me, starring Samuel L. Jackson, Pierce Brosnan. And we're going to be talking about all of them. So, but Patrice, I know yours is How to Train Your Dragon. So why are you excited for How to Train Your Dragon?
Well, I don't know if you've heard, but Universal opened a new park down here 100 miles from where I live, and one of
There you
those five
go.
lands is based off of How to Train Your Dragon. So I feel like
Nice.
I could be missing something if I go to this park and I don't see the newest movie. Because
So
even though there's plenty of material and IP to work from for them to theme this land, you can't help but think with a new movie coming out and the park just opening that some of it is not in some way detailed around this film. So, as someone who really enjoys the tiniest of details when I go places or when I watch movies, I feel like if I don't see this before I hit that park, I'm going to miss like some of the cool tiny details that some artist somewhere put into a wall or an entrance or a sign or some theming that they thought, oh, someone that saw this movie is really going to appreciate this. I want to be that person. I love that. So even though I think it's ridiculous to be remaking a movie this quick, I've got kids. They're into that kind of thing. Like they're the right age for these types of movies anyway. So, and you know me, I'm always for 3-star fun over 5-star serious. So,
you go. Which
That is a
also
great
now,
quote.
yep, you just broke something in my brain because now I'm convinced I know why they're remaking this
yeah,
movie is to sell a theme park.
of course.
And we thought that only Disney would be so bold. Apparently,
Oh,
Universal will
the
do it
Super
too.
Mario and the Harry Potter parts are going to be slammed no matter what. How I Train Your Dragon kind of needed a new push to get people to want to experience that aspect of the land. So, I mean, it's not surprising to me that they would spend that much real estate on what they're doing there. And I just feel like that's probably going to be like I've seen some of the point of view videos that have come out already of that area of the park, and it's really impressive. So, pretty
But
excited.
I wouldn't say I'm excited for this movie. I'm hoping it's good. And like you have Dean DeVois who's coming back and directing it. I would be a liar if I didn't say I was happy to see Gerard Butler back as Stoic. But I think it'd be pretty cool with the big special effects that they could do to see what they do in terms of the dragon action. But Haley or Rod, are either of you excited for How to Train Your Dragon?
I'm kind of excited. I mean, the trilogy just ended like what, 5 years ago, or not even 5 years ago, 6 years ago at this point. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm gonna go see it regardless. You
Yeah.
know, I like Patrice. I'm more excited to go to the theme park at Epic Universe and check out that than I am to see the movie. So
Well, there you go.
My thing is that okay, and look, I don't know as much as the rest of you about the inner workings of film and such, but everyone thought the dragon was cute. That was what we liked about it, right? And so is the dragon still gonna be cute? And if you make it live action,
He
are they just
looks
gonna use the
exactly the
same
same
dragon?
to
Like
me,
Yeah,
to
what?
he
be
doesn't look different
honest.
at all to me,
no,
which is the weird
No.
part.
yeah,
Then why are there real people walking around?
Right.
I don't get it. Just make another animated movie, but employ artists, not AI.
Right. Yeah, I don't
Um,
disagree. And honestly, if this park wasn't opening, like my excitement level would be much lower. Like I feel like I am only excited for this movie because of the park, which means that Universal branding is doing something right.
and then Universal has won. So
Yeah,
there you
I
go.
hate that they won, and I know that they're winning. But
So now, Rod and I both chose Materialists, and I think I know why Rod is excited for this movie, but I'm going to let him tell you.
Pedro Pascal. That's a good. No, I'm just kidding. Yes. Listen, now let's take a trip down memory lane, Shane. 2 years ago when
Yep.
Past Lives came out, and that movie changed my life. That's probably still my favorite film of the decade. Well, no, I take it back. Spider-Man No Way Home is, but this is a close second. Is Past Lives? That movie was. I,
Mhm.
I first I didn't really know what to expect, and I walked out crying my eyes out, and I still revisited it. I don't know what that says about my mental state right now, but it is what it is. It's a beautiful film, and so hearing Celine Song was going to do a romantic comedy or a romantic drama slash comedy, Shane, with my favorite actress in the world, Dakota Johnson, and then you got
Yep.
Chris Evans and Pedro Pascal. I mean, it's just a match made in heaven for me. I mean, I might see this more than I saw Endgame in theaters, and we don't need to revisit that train. So, I mean,
Materialist needs you like the Fall Guy needed you, Rod. You
that's
need to
right.
show up like 7 times in theaters to go check out this movie.
That's right.
Skew the numbers.
Listen, yeah, I have my own set of box office numbers for the amount of times I saw it versus everybody else.
So there you go. Um, I love Past Lives. I got very excited. Like Celine Song did such a great job with that. It got to the point where like whatever she did next, I would be excited for. And then just the talent on screen. I want to see Chris Evans doing more things now that he's not being Captain America. And this will be interesting if he's gonna like I don't think he's gonna be a full-on dick like he was pre being Captain America and also how he was in Knives Out. So I'll be interested to see that. I love Pedro Pascal and honestly, and Rod's gonna love this, Dakota Johnson has been growing on me a lot. So
I don't think the viewers heard you fully. Can you repeat that one more time for all of us, Shane?
Dakota Johnson is growing on me a lot.
Cheers, buddy.
so
Cheers. I'm glad. Okay. Okay.
so I'm excited about this, but Patrice, was this on your radar?
a little bit because Dakota Johnson, ever since I read her grandmother's memoir, I've been a little more interested in what her and her mom have done over the years.
Mhm.
So I've been trying to catch up more on. I mean, I had a decent amount of some of some of them already on my watch list, but I try to like knock them off now as they're coming out more than like catching
Mhm.
up. Because I think the whole
There you go.
family's just interesting.
And then Haley, had you heard of this movie?
I had not.
So it'll be coming out, and you know
But
what?
now I'm very interested.
Yeah. And I think I was the only one that heard of this one before we started jumping on the Zoom is the Unholy Trinity, which is a new Western. I know Haley, you chose this one because Samuel L. Jackson and Western caught your attention.
And you tell me no one's heard of it? Like now now I really want to be the one who sees it. It's that logical thing of, oh, then I get to be the one who is like, oh, there's this
Recommending
movie
it to
that's
people.
really good that you all have to see, which I never get to be that person. because I am not like the rest of you and really on top of it. I need Shane to tell me what to watch at any given time. But no, it looks dark and gritty, which if you're gonna, that's another thing. If I'm gonna watch a Western, and actually the last time that Shane and I were together, I think we watched Bone Tomahawk.
We did.
So, like I want it real, dirty, like I don't want this like cutesy polished Western thing that some people do. No, I don't need it to be as gross as Bone Tomahawk, to be clear. But
But as sweaty
like
as Tombstone.
yeah, I want it to be like to capture the real spirit of the West, which is like, listen, people, they were out
People
there, they were
die.
dirty, they were like getting diseases, and
It's like you ever played Oregon Trail?
Oregon Trail.
This is exactly what this was like.
I think that's what it is. Psychologically, I'm like, I was taught at a very impressionable age about the Oregon Trail, and none of this until like 1883, maybe. That was when I was like, no, see, they
See,
told me about this.
That's the Oregon Trail that I remember, which I
Yes.
have on my Switch.
That's so great.
But this is definitely has a gritty kind of Western vibe to it. And I'm a huge Pierce Brosnan fan, and I'm just like, I'll watch anything that Pierce Brosnan pops up in. As long as he doesn't sing. I got that once in Mamma Mia. I don't need it again. But let's get into Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. And I have some background here. This came out in 1984. This is actually based off of a manga that Miyazaki actually wrote himself. This had a budget of $758,000 and made $14.3 million. So I think it did pretty well for itself. This ranked second best anime in 2007 during a Japanese survey. So I don't feel like this is one of the Miyazaki films that has really connected with American audiences, but Japanese audiences love Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, apparently. This was released before Studio Ghibli even existed. Some people get confused that like they just assume all of Miyazaki's films were from Studio Ghibli, but this was one of the last ones that was not. There is a heavily edited version that released in the US in the mid 80s called Warriors of the Wind and pissed off Miyazaki so much that he put a no cut rule into any contracts that he made for any international distributions of his movies moving forward. So, fun lessons to learn. Don't trust other people with your work. Toshio Suzuki, editor of Animage magazine, gave the opportunity to Miyazaki to write his own manga after he had Lupin the Third come out, and also encouraged him to adapt the manga into a film. Isao Takahata and Miyazaki worked together and chose Topcraft as the right studio to produce this film. So it was Topcraft Studio that actually put this out. This adapted 16 chapters of Miyazaki's and his manga into this film. And future Neon Genesis Evangelion animators worked on this film. So a lot of the animators that made this film went on to have really illustrious careers in the world of anime. This only took 9 months to complete, which kind of blows my mind. This movie only took 9 months, seeing as animation takes a long time to put together. Some of the main inspirations for this was Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea, which is interesting because that also got adapted into an anime from Studio Ghibli. Brian Aldiss's Hot House, Isaac Asimov's Nightfall, and I saw this one coming a mile away watching this movie with Lord of the Rings because I swear I did. Well, I'll ask everybody. I did watch the dub version, and Patrick Stewart's character 100% is Gandalf, and nobody's going to tell me any different. Nausicaa is based, like the character Nausicaa is based on Homer's Phaeacian princess from the Odyssey. The animators were influenced by Frank Herbert's Dune, which also not a surprise watching this. Which also I don't. How many of you have seen Mickey 17?
I have, yeah.
Did you think about Mickey 17 at the climax of this movie?
I
Because
did.
I did.
Very much so, yes.
Yes, so I think Bong Joon-ho is a fan of Nausicaa too. Just throwing that out there. This is specifically supposed to have a diesel punk style, and first of many Miyazaki films with anti-war and environmental focus, which that honestly became a pretty big running force in all of his films, many of his films after this. But here's our little synopsis here. So, warrior and pacifist Princess Nausicaa desperately struggles to prevent two warring nations from destroying themselves and their dying planet. So, with all of that, we're going to go around the horn and get everybody's general thoughts, and then we can dive into things. But I'm going to go around the horn based off of my screen. Haley, what were your general thoughts on Nausicaa?
So I may be the only person here who hadn't seen it before. I've seen a number of Miyazaki movies. This hadn't been one of them, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it because, you know, I've never disliked any of the movies I've seen by Miyazaki, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to see it. Um, and then here's some interesting input on it. My first thoughts, right out the gate were if I had been, you know, a young kid watching this, it would have fit right in with the Lorax and the Fern Gully and like all these things that I was raised on and kind of like radicalized by as I sit here, a vegetarian who drives a Prius and half Canadian pacifist person. Like it just and it's such a like instant classic example of that sort of stuff. It's simple and a kid can watch it. I don't think all of Miyazaki's movies are like digestible for children, but this one to me, perhaps more than any of the ones I've seen, was like, oh yeah, I mean, I would have loved this as a kid and really would have understood, and I would have been thinking about that little baby bug and thought like, no, don't hurt the baby bug.
Little.
I know, but still, he was a baby. He was a baby, and you could tell. So, like, I mean, I really appreciate this movie is at this point relatively old, all things considered, but the animation really holds up. It's a simple, true, good plot that you can just like really get behind. And I did appreciate, they did the like, okay, the future, we're far in like kind of a dystopian future, but they didn't like revel in the darkness of that. Whereas most things that I think I normally go for or see that are set in that time are a lot meaner and scarier. So this was like a really, again, I think if you were a kid, this would be such a good introduction to like the dystopian genre where they're really making important points, but also, you know, you can leave at the end, you feel really good about it, and everyone is like kind of kumbayaing in a nice way. Oh, there's like death and destruction, but they breeze over it. They don't sort of like revel in it. So I thought this was a great one. This might be my favorite.
Okay. Now, I do want to reiterate two side questions. So I know, Haley, you hit on this was your first time watching this. Did you watch the dubbed version or the sub? Okay.
I did.
So those two questions I'm going to ask both you, Patrice, and Rod to answer too. But Patrice, your turn.
So I don't ever remember seeing this I've never seen it as an adult. I had really strong like shadows of a memory of different scenes of this movie that I feel like I probably saw the Manson dub of it when I was a kid because Topcraft was the same studio that did a lot of other animated films I watched in that time frame like The Hobbit and The Last Unicorn. So it seems like whoever was putting out all their VHS was probably in the ballpark of things I had rented at that time because
Yeah.
I had very clear memories of Nausicaa on the Wind Glider and things like that. So it was cool to watch it as an adult, but I actually watched it in a kind of interesting way where I didn't watch it all the way through in one version. I
Okay.
watched parts of it in all three because there's the original Japanese language version with the subtitles. There's the Manson dub, which is a horrible dub, and it's not, you don't actually, you get 20 less minutes of movie too. They cut
Yeah.
out a couple of key parts that I think are kind of stupid to get rid of. There was no real reason other than maybe pacing. They were just trying to keep it quicker for kids to be interested, maybe. And
Like kids need to
then
watch this. This needs to be 90 minutes.
yeah, exactly. It's like, no, it has to be like under, this is the time limit you've got. And because that wasn't in the contract, they could do it. So, which was just crazy. And then, the much later English dub, which I actually found where someone had numerically rated the versions to see which was superior. And they gave like, different, it was really cool because the English dub version with Patrick Stewart and everyone scored higher because the inflection of tone, the correctness of the words coming out of mouths, all that kind of stuff, like actually having like muffled voices when their faces are covered, which in the Japanese language version, you just hear people talking no matter whether their faces are covered or not, which is like when you are cognizant of it is a little distracting. So there are points to this where typically I do enjoy the language it was made in on most things. I really do enjoy the English dub version a little bit better.
And I guess, Rod, what's your experience with this and how did you watch it?
So yeah, I watched this literally last night on HBO Max. So that was probably the dub version that I'm guessing everyone else here watched as well. So, I don't have the greatest of history with Miyazaki just because I haven't seen all of his films. So this is probably only my third or fourth
Mhm.
of film of his that I've actually watched. I think my favorite is still Spirited Away. And about 15 minutes into this, Haley and Patrice, I literally texted Shane and I said, WTF is going on? Because
Isn't that always, though, how you feel 15 minutes in? I always
I
go in
guess
blind
so.
to these movies, and I'm like, okay,
Well,
it's gonna make sense at the end.
I
Okay.
have a bone to pick with Shane because, he has chosen directors, and I'm like, I have seen maybe three or four films from these people. So, Shane, we'll talk about that later. But, going into the movie, I I didn't know how I was gonna feel 15 minutes in after I texted Shane, and then I kept on watching. I was like, this was. I think Kayla, you said it was simple. It was digestible. I had a good time watching it. I don't think I'll ever go back and rewatch it again. I don't think I got that emotional impact I did, say from like a Spirited Away. But I had a good time watching it. What I did think though, and this is a weird thought I had, I was like, this would be pretty fun live action. I don't know if it ever will be live action, but that's kind of the thought I had walking away. So I was like, I would have a good time if this was adapted into a live action. Not like a How to Train Your Dragon where this happened, 5 years ago.
Yeah,
But
because this movie
This is
is,
celebrated 40 years, so we're
yeah,
good on
so
on remakes,
exactly.
right?
it's been a while.
It's had
But
some time.
well, what's interesting, Riley, you bring up that point is because like I've seen elements of this film in live action movies.
Right.
And that's exactly why I asked about Mickey 17, because I am convinced the climax of that movie is based off of this. With like
1000%.
yeah, because they're giant volley type insect things that we have to protect them, but there's certain groups that want to kill them and destroy them, and it's just like, this seems familiar. Now, I'll admit my favorite Miyazaki film is Princess Mononoke, and this I feel like is the groundwork
Yeah.
for that. And I think this one feels a little bit more leaning towards like a Lord of the Rings kind of adventurous kind of thing than Mononoke. But this is the film that really laid the groundwork for a lot of his thematic work and the things that he wants to talk about in his films. Because if a Miyazaki movie doesn't have an anti-war slant somewhere in it, I'm like, were you okay? When you were making this movie? Because like even just throwing it into like the most random of movies, like even like Boy and the Heron starts with crazy war sequence and then gets lost in its fantasy world. But this, I think this is just such a cool, big, expansive world building. And that's what I appreciate. And why I feel like fantasy is so hard to do right in live action, but is perfect for animation is because you could just come up with anything in animation. And the world building of this is fantastic. All the creatures. Um, even just like some of the imagery, like towards the very end, the climax of this movie is wild. Which is this giant stampede of these bugs and giant like melting Colossus just beaming like nuclear blasts out of his mouth. And
Can't
like Rod,
unsee.
yeah, when you messaged me, Rod, I'm like, there's gonna like that was the crazy stuff I was thinking about. I'm like, just you wait. And he's
Well,
just like,
I wanted to message you back, and I was like, I'll just talk to him in the morning because I needed the night just to decompress.
because like that was a moment where like this guy's just like this thing's straight up shooting nuclear blasts out of his mouth like Godzilla, and just blowing all of these bugs up. But they did not relent. They just kept coming. Nausicaa's cool and just straight up just like standing there on her glider like a boss.
Okay,
And
yeah. I was gonna say Shane because she literally like yeah she's standing there. I'm like she's gonna die right she's because she's getting shot at. I'm thinking what am I watching right now? What is happening? Her foot gets caught in acid. I'm like okay I'm done. I've had enough.
she she had plot armor upon plot armor, but she is a badass.
I respect that she got shot at all. Because to be honest,
Yep.
I didn't think like you think about a movie like this, there's so much plot armor that no one's at, but like people did die,
Yes.
and and I mean again they really glaze over it to the point where I didn't know if they actually shot the king because everyone was a little too chill about it, and I'm like, but they killed him, and then they're like, we came for peace, and I'm like, you murdered their monarch.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
See,
But
now I'm
okay,
just
like that's setting the stage for how these people are. They're clearly like not on the same page.
now I'm just thinking the Eric Andre meme. It's like we came for peace. Who would do this?
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
but like this, like many Miyazaki films, is like doesn't pull punches for kids. Like there's like burning villages, there's violence, like stuff is happening because the world's violent.
Mhm.
And especially today, like I can imagine a kid in the early 80s, mid 80s who doesn't have nonstop news or social media to just pump all the horrible things of the world at you. But like kids see a lot of stuff. And like this is something where it's like I appreciate the fact that this shows the violence and the stakes of it all, but also the hope and the fact that like we can come together. And maybe those giant bug things aren't so bad. Maybe you shouldn't be trying to exterminate all of them. And maybe if you do try to destroy their home, they might come at you. And they're scary because like that image of just all of these giant slug, bug, whatever kind of creatures they combine to make them. I love the design, and that's where the Dune came in. Because like I'm like, those look like something that would be in a Dune movie. And a lot of like the ships and stuff. So I think that's really cool that they really drew upon a lot of like really famous science fiction and fantasy and brought that to life. And the voice cast, love Patrick Stewart. Patrick Stewart's amazing. Um, at one point, because I was watching this with my wife Jess, and she's just like, "Is that Prince Humperdinck?" And I'm like, "It is Chris Sarandon." And she's like, "Oh, and that's Mark Hamill." It's you're gonna pick up. It's gonna be Mark Hamill. Like Uma Thurman and like even Shia LaBeouf, like even Stevens,
Yeah.
Shia LaBeouf popping up here.
Brandon paused the movie. He's like, who is that? I know that voice. I was like, I don't know. And then he was like, Shia LaBeouf, what? But also from that time, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, actually this is like, this makes a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, because this dub was made 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So these actors in a lot of different plays, like Uma Thurman, like this was like Kill Bill era Uma Thurman coming in here and doing some good work too. But I guess what were some of the other things that really stood out to all of you?
The score, for one.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yep.
This has got the best soundtrack. I love it. It reminded me a lot of the Sea Prince and the Fire Child to the point where I had to look it up to see if it was the same person,
Same
and it
person.
wasn't. Because I was like, this is just so similar. And there were other aspects that were really similar to that movie too, which I'm sure Shane's the only other person that's even heard of that movie, and it's because I made him watch it.
Yes,
But
it is because of Patrice that I have seen that movie.
because even the opening credits, I thought the animation style at a lot of points too, just with the
Yeah.
abyss in Sea Prince and Firechild, and the the Valley of the Wind here, and like, they call it the toxic jungle in the English language version, but the Sea of Decay is what it actually is translated to in Japan in this. So I think differences like that kind of did make it a little bit brighter for an American audience. So it does. And looking at the history of this, how this movie came to be made is just crazy too, because I go far down those rabbit holes. So when I found out they did this in only a year, and that Miyazaki wrote the manga specifically with the intent to make the film, because at the time there wasn't a project for him that he was interested in working on to animate. So they said, hey, look, we'll give you the space and animate to put the story. So he was writing it with the specific intention of making this, which I think is really cool, because usually it's just adapted after, because it's like, hey, look, this is super popular, like, let's do this. But he started off knowing that this was the end game, was to make the film. So I think that was kind of cool. And you can see, though, the world building, like you were talking about, is there because it was always the intent, was to be able to show it in this format. So I think it's very cool that it doesn't seem slapped on. It doesn't seem like we made this just to sell a toy. We made this just to make a movie. It's integral to the story from the beginning. And I think that's really neat. But it's also cool that they didn't have the ending nailed down at the beginning. Like, that wasn't written until a couple months before it was done. They were like, are we going to kill her? We're going to keep her alive? We're going to keep it ambiguous. So that, and knowing that, you can kind of see, like we were talking about earlier with, like, oh, look, she's getting shot. Oh, she's like, all this stuff's happening, because they didn't know which way they were going with it either. So I think it is cool to see, like, at that time, a female protagonist warrior, because this started that for everyone. We didn't even have She-Ra yet here. So this wasn't, and especially in Japan, that wasn't something you were going to see until after, Miyazaki started doing this with, a lot of his work after that. So I just think it's a very cool way to tell, stories we've kind of heard, but with a different twist on it. And there is just so much you can see, like you were talking about Dune. If you like Final Fantasy, you can definitely see that the creator of Final Fantasy has credited this movie as some of his inspiration. If you don't think that they're walking chocobos through the desert at the beginning of this, then you've never played Final Fantasy. There's just parts that are so similar. I'm just like, oh, a giant chicken. I'm a sucker for a giant chicken. I love this.
And that's the thing too, because I feel like if you showed this movie to a lot of people today, they'd be like, wait a minute. And then they would start piecing things together in terms of, like, this was a big influence. And, this film, like I mentioned, I like some of his films that come after that this really set the stage for better. But this is, from start to finish, such a wonderful fantasy adventure that just has so many big moments, and the weight and the world building. And, it's very interesting watching anime versus, like, American animated movies, and realizing, like, anime is a lot weirder and is much more willing to take big chances. Like, especially like the climax with, like, that giant, like, decaying colossus thing, and just like, what is this? And just like,
Half-baked.
yeah, and it's like, this is wild. And that's what I appreciate about it. Because, like, if you're gonna go with animation, you can do anything. And I appreciate just the creativity and the ambition of it all. But, and, it certainly has, like, some tropes and stuff that you probably, like, this maybe would have been one of those stories that really set up these tropes moving forward. But yes, and just to reiterate, the score is amazing. Like, honestly, that's kind of redundant. Any Miyazaki movie you watch, you're just like, yeah, that score was great. And you know what, Patrice? I thought the same exact thing watching Lupin and this, where I'm just like, this kind of seems like some of the animation from the movies we watched for that Spotlight. Because it was
It's
like,
so wild that they
it
weren't
was that
connected.
era.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just the era, and they were both, like, created in Japan, so that just the art style and everything. I had a hard time believing they weren't from some of the same creative minds and the same, like, I couldn't find any overlap, and I found that wild.
Well, and I think it's also interesting because where do most Americans come in contact with animation is Disney. What's one of the least popular eras of Disney animation? 80s, like this
Yeah.
this point.
I mean, Black Cauldron-y type stuff that's more gritty like this, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's crazy that they didn't really try to grab onto more of this Last Unicorn,
Mhm.
Lord of the Rings style stuff that was going on at that point because they're still popular today. Like there's still I mean, if you can go on Amazon right now and watch Last Unicorn anytime you want, it is always there. Like it hasn't gone away.
Mhm.
It's not one of those like, oh, it's obscure and hard to find. Whereas like Flight of Dragons kind of, but
Yeah.
which the cover art for this has the Flight of Dragons problem too, where it is just the English version that came out first was horrible. You see someone on a Pegasus. It's like it's wild stuff that makes no sense. Like the Manson home video version edit has a weird cover that has nothing to do with the story.
Well, at least we know even 40 years ago, advertising people were really messing with audiences to try to get them to buy into stuff. That is one of my favorite things is where I see a poster for something. I'm like, oh, this looks so cute. It's like, no, this was not. It's
Mhm.
like, what were you trying to sell us?
I do want to say too, Shane, like I
Yeah.
feel like I would have enjoyed this more had I seen it on the big screen. Because I think there's so much here to appreciate more on a bigger screen than watching it like in my living room that
Mhm.
like, if this were ever to be re-released, I probably would go out and check it out and I probably would appreciate it more.
Well, and I am not sponsored by this, but I would love to be. To shamelessly plug, Ghibli Fest happens every single year where they put films from Studio Ghibli back into theaters, and I think they kind of cheat because I think they put some of the ones that aren't technically like this technically wasn't Studio Ghibli, but then Studio Ghibli was the one that worked with Disney to re-release it in 2005, so it has been welcomed in. But no, there was one year I tried to go to every single one of the 12 films that they were going to release, and then my transmission went out on my car. I'm like, well, I need to spend less money. So I cut out going to the movies to see movies I had already seen before. But no, I highly recommend taking advantage of Ghibli Fest. I have seen Ponyo in a theater, which was so much fun. The Cat Returns, which is such a random, weird sequel to Whisper of the Heart. But like just being able to watch some of these films in a theater is pretty epic. And I'm so mad I didn't get to go see Mononoke in IMAX when they re-released that earlier this year because that would have been so damn cool. But yeah, if you get a chance, you should check out some of these when they release them for Ghibli Fest.
Yeah, I feel like it would be really worth it to just for people to go, especially if you've seen the movie, like any of these movies as a kid.
Hmm.
I think the youngest, I saw Spirited Away. That was the one I saw at the youngest age. And I need to rewatch it because my perceptions of it at that time, there was a lot going on there that I know I did not pick up on at all. I think Nausicaa is a really good option for little kids because most people can just pick up on it. But, like being an adult and watching it now, there's still a lot to think about. And, I pondered it obviously for a couple days after I watched it. And one thing that really resonated with me about it, well, there were two big things that resonated with me. The main female characters, because there are a couple, and that's the sort of thing I like to think about, especially in an older movie. Um, First of all, that the villain, the Uma Thurman like villain character, there's like something going on there. She's like not a simple person. First of all, she clearly has like a lot of dysmorphia stuff that she's dealing with, which I'm like, wow, that is it. And they didn't brush over that. Like she clearly has a complex and is working through like being a woman in power and like all this different stuff. And they don't like dwell on it, but they mention it. And for someone like me, I picked up on that right away. And I'm like, wow, that's really interesting that they would address that at all. So that was cool. And then, Nausicaa herself, like I'm kind of usually programmed to be annoyed by like the perfect little princess. I don't like that trope. But then I thought about it a little bit. And in this case in particular, I'm going to give her a pass because I actually think this valley, based on how everyone else is treating it, is sort of like the backwoods. She's like a little country bumpkin who has lived in this like isolated sweet place that's been sort of cut off. Like you look at their technology and what they've got going on. It's not a big city. Like, they had like one little warplane that they had tucked off in a corner. And she's sort of like the embodiment of this like pastoral society where people are closer to nature, and she's innocent in that like it's not naive, but I feel like she actually embodies this sort of like sometimes knowing too much and overthinking things is the human problem. Like she's childish, but in that way where when she was a little girl, she began this whole thing. And then again, the movie like harkens back to that and says like this began with her when she was a child and had that childlike feeling of like I do not know this is evil. And nature is usually innocent, and like her innocence and the innocence, the inner innocence of these creatures like bond and create this like supernatural connection. But I was like, that's really it's simple, but it is profound if you think about it. It's like a very, very beautiful idea that this little girl, she didn't see that these things were evil, and she was right. She was the only one who was right. And because she never lost that, and society didn't beat it out of her, she was the one who saved her home and maybe was able to finally get the other people who were destroying the world all over again to see the truth. So I just think that's so beautiful.
I don't know what else to add to that.
I don't know how you follow that up.
I guess does anybody else have any other thoughts that we want to throw out about Nausicaa before we wrap up?
I don't know how you follow that up, Shane.
No, I was like,
Sorry,
please don't call me next.
I'm a huge tree hugger,
Well-
so like I was like, this is man, I would have eaten this up so hard as a little kid because this was me. I was the one who would like pick the worms up off the sidewalk and put them back in the grass.
Well, that was a very great way of putting just the magic of this story and what really ties this together and gives it some meaning, where it works on both. You can look at it in a very simple and straightforward way and then peel back the layers the more that you want to go into it. But this is a wonderful fantasy adventure, and really, like Lupin the Third is such a very different film, which was his first feature, because it's like, and it's like a charming, roguish gangster thief going up against like Italian people from Japanese perspective. And then this is where I feel like this is the identity that most people know of Miyazaki, is this wonderful expression of fantasy and animation. So I'm looking forward to diving into all of these. I know next week I'm going to be diving into Castle in the Sky and then My Neighbor Totoro, and then we're just diving in here, and this will be over in a couple months, because honestly, all of his short films are only available at the Studio Ghibli Museum in Japan. So someday when I go, I'll come back and do episodes for them. But for now, it's mostly just his feature films that I'm going to be focusing on. But before we send all of our wonderful audience home, and we're going to give you some recommendations. So let's go around the horn here. So Haley, what did you want to recommend to everybody?
So I read more books than I watch movies. So probably one of the books that I read recently that I would love to put out there, because I think this author, I've read two things by him, and at this point, anything he puts out, I'm reading it. So the first thing I read by him, and the author's name is Nanakwame Adaje Brenya. I'm probably not saying that perfectly, but he's an African American writer. I believe he's part of the queer community. And just, I mean, this man is like speaking to our time. Like his books came out recently enough that you read them and they feel really fresh, really raw. They are difficult reads, not from like a literary perspective, but from a content perspective. I started with a collection of short stories he published called Friday Black. Um, they are intense, but some of them are so sardonic and like have this cutting humor that I was like laughing out loud by just like the cringe of like the situations and the people that he is bringing up. And I mean, he's got a really, again, a really fresh take on. I've read a lot of short story compilations. I like to read a lot of books, but his stuff feels really like we're here now, and this is a person who knows what's happening and has a really nuanced way of talking about it. But he's got a book too, which is called Chain Gang All Stars. And very simply, it is representing a reality that could be now, or, maybe in the very not so distant future, where prisons start to pit the prisoners against each other in like a gladiator style show for the entertainment of the masses. So
I'm honestly surprised we haven't gotten to that point yet.
it's the whole thing is just what scares me the most is how plausible, like how plausible it really is. But yeah, it's not a long book, but it packs a massive punch, and I'm still thinking about it. It's like 2 books ago that I read it, but I'm still thinking about it.
I will be adding that to my wish list for all of my books. I have like 15 right now that I have that I have to read first before I buy any more books. The forever endless book reader problem. Always too many books to buy, and it's like, well, I should probably read the ones I have. Patrice, what would you like to recommend to everybody?
There's an Amazon original streaming series called Etoile, Etoile. I know for all of us that don't speak French and pronounce everything horribly, because I got into this show because I saw it was created by Amy Sherman Palladino, who did The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And I love that show so much. And, kind of been in withdrawal since it ended. And you can't help but notice in the trailer, the Lenny Bruce is in it.
Yes.
And I was like, hey, I like him. What's going on here? Oh, it's about ballet. So it sucked me in pretty quick. It is about a third in French. So being a non-French speaker, it took me a little while to get through. It's only 8 episodes, but it did take me a little while to get through it, just because you do have to actually watch if you're not fluent in French, because you will miss so much ridiculously quick and witty dialogue. I mean, it is exactly what you'd expect from, the person that wrote Gilmore Girls and Miss Maisel. And it's a lot of the same faces that you have seen since the beginning too, which is cool. There was a lot of just, she loves ballet. She's always loved ballet. And you can just tell the amount of care that she put into everything she wrote into this series. There's 27 different ballets, like in parts or pieces, that are depicted in this show, and some were original to the show, like created by their fictitious choreographer, who's this just brilliant neurodivergent kind of guy in New York that gets shipped off to France. To what they basically did was do like an exchange program between 2 ballet companies. So they sent different people, like a composer and a dancer and a choreographer, to France, and then from France you got their Etoile, their star, their main principal dancer came here, and she's an eco warrior and she's amazing. And just all these personalities from different geographical locations getting together, and the financial parts of it and all that kind of stuff. It's just, there's so much going on. I've watched it 3 times and got different stuff out of it every time. But it's just, there's so many layers to the humor. I love it. It's just visually, and the soundtrack is amazing.
It's
It's
from
such a
Spark. The Sparks
yeah.
made music for it, right? Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I've listened to the soundtrack on Spotify a lot, because there's some original pieces that they made for the original ballets that were in it that are just amazing. So it's just, it's a lot of like classical pieces that have been updated and things like that. But then there is the very classic sounding pieces too. So it's just very cool. You can tell there's a big appreciation for the art form, and wanting to preserve, these big, concert halls and things like that, that still do these productions. And the fact that they didn't just slap up backgrounds to do these, they actually, for one of these, it's like a 3-minute scene of a ballet, but they found a set for this particular ballet production that was being stored overseas. It's somewhere in Asia, that was owned by a Ukrainian company, and they were able to rent it, have it shipped to France, put back together so that they could shoot this ballet on a set that was actually made for that show. And I think that's very cool that they put that kind of care into aspects of this, that literally it's a 3 to 5 minute scene, but they put that much effort into making sure it was correct and that the dancers are correct. It's not just background extras, it's actual dancers doing background things. So I think that's very cool. They didn't shy away from like the beat up feet and all that kind of stuff, but it's still, it's still fun, but it still has the drama aspects done right. And it's a lot of fun to watch.
I've listened to some of the music because I like Sparks, especially ever since I watched that documentary that Edgar Wright made of them. And I've heard some of the music, and also I'm a huge Marvelous Mrs. Maisel fan, so I was excited to find out that the creator had another show out. So this is definitely high on my watch list. I want to check out. And then Rob, what would you like to recommend to people?
Yeah, your friends and neighbors over on Apple TV Plus, which I believe is challenging Mac Shane to be the best streaming service out there right now. I just think Apple TV Plus has rarely missed with their shows. Not
Mhm.
everything has landed, but I think there has been a lot more hits than there have been misses over there. And this is another hit. I mean, they greenlit a season 2 before season 1 even started streaming. So this is about stars John Hamm, Amanda Peet, and Olivia Munn, who John Hamm plays a hedge fund manager who loses his job and delves into a life of crime by stealing fancy watches and artwork from um, wealthy people's neighborhoods. And you start watching this show and you're trying to think, why would I care about any of these characters? I mean, it's this wealthy guy who's down on his luck. And then when you really start delving into these characters and he's divorced and his best friend cheated, slept with his wife, it gets really really dark and goes into some, I won't say uncomfortable places, but I just like how this show really explored each of these characters, going to their backstories, that more than just the elitist persona they kind of play off of it, that they come off when you first get introduced to them. So yeah, it's a dark comedy, it's a crime drama, it's probably my second favorite show of the year, Shannon. The Studio is still my favorite. I thought The Studio was one of the best shows of the year, but this is a very, very close second here with this, and it's a high recommendation. And plus, John Hamm doesn't miss, and he's also doing voice narration, voiceover narration for this, which is amazing. And Amanda Peet, Shane, who I'm kind of like hit or miss on, she's
Mhm.
great here, and I
Okay.
haven't loved Olivia Munn this much since The Newsroom. Like she's
Nice.
fantastic here. So this is a high, high recommendation, especially if you have Apple TV Plus.
Yeah, I'm a big John Hamm fan, and every time I want to go watch The Studio or Murderbot, this one keeps popping up on there. It's
Yep.
on my list to watch. I haven't got around to starting this one yet, but it's definitely on my radar. My usual thing that I do is I recommend a new film that I've watched, one off my watch list, and a rewatch of one of my movies. As you all, this is a video show, and you can see my obscene amount of DVDs and Blu-rays and stuff that I have behind me. But one new film, which technically, as we're recording this, hasn't come out, but will be out by the time this episode comes out, is I Don't Understand You, which is billed as a horror comedy, but for the record, is not a horror movie at all. This is just a dark comedy. It has Andrew Rannells and Nick Kroll, who are a gay couple who are vacationing in Italy, who go to this really remote, like, woman's home for this authentic Italian dinner. And then people accidentally start dying. And then they're trying to, like, they have a woman, Amanda Seyfried, who's having their child um back in the United States, and they're like, we're gonna be parents, we can't be doing this. And it's so funny. It is such a and like Nick Kroll and Andrew Rannells are so funny. I do, for the record, I don't buy them as for a second as a couple. And also, I don't want to be this way, but I don't buy Nick Kroll as a gay guy at all. Because it's like, do you think he said for us to be careful because we're a gay? And I'm just like, well, now I'm out of this. Now I'm like, don't believe you. And also one point he does a voice which is definitely his hormone monster voice from Big Mouth, and I'm just like, it's a really funny film. And now in my head, I'm like, I kind of wanted to see what this movie would have been if it was Andrew Rannells and Josh Gad as a gay couple, because I love the two of them together. But I would still recommend this. This is fun. It doesn't have as big of a bite as you might expect, but it's a really funny movie, so I would recommend it. And then off my watch list, this is a random one, The Pink Panther Strikes Again, which this movie is absurd. The plot of this movie is the former chief inspector who's in an insane asylum because of Jacques Cousteau. Inspector Clouseau is now the chief inspector, and this man escapes the insane asylum and holds the world hostage with like weapons of mass destruction, and all he wants is Clouseau. So then the whole world sends assassins out to get Clouseau, and it's just obnoxious, ridiculous shenanigans from start to finish. And also, at one point, Omar Sharif pops up as an Egyptian assassin. And I just like, my mouth dropped. I just turned to Jess while we're watching. I'm like, is that Sharif randomly in this movie? It was. I had to look it up. And this is bonkers. If you've ever watched any of the original Pink Panther films with Peter Sellers, he's just an absolute delight to enjoy. And apparently, all of them are on Max because now they keep recommending all of them to me after I watch this one. So it's a bunch of shenanigans. And then for my for my Wasteland retrospective podcast, I'm going to be talking about The Big Lebowski and Raising Arizona with my friend Mike Hilty, and I've gushed about The Big Lebowski enough times that I'm going to recommend you check out Raising Arizona, which apparently is the favorite comedy of one Edgar Wright, who absolutely loves this movie. I love the Coens, and Raising Arizona is bonkers of ridiculousness. Nick Cage has never been funnier, and him is high, and his just crazy hair, his Hawaiian shirt. Holly Hunter is just an absolute delight, and John Goodman and was it Williams Forsythe play two brothers who escape from prison. There's a man ripped out of a Mad Max movie who's a bounty hunter coming after, all because they stole a baby. Because they couldn't have their own. Like, if you love the first 10 minutes up, like short of somebody dying, the cold open of Raising Arizona is like the comedic version of that open from Up. It just sets us up so perfectly. The humor's amazing. There's a lot of heart, and every single actor is perfectly cast in this movie from top to bottom. It's shenanigans. And it has a yodeling score to it, which is also absolutely ridiculous on top of it. It's such a good time. If you haven't seen Raising Arizona, highly recommend. But
I'm so glad you brought that up
yeah,
because with Father's Day around the corner,
ah,
that is such a
there,
dad movie. And
Perfect
maybe I
film.
just think that because my dad loves that movie and it is literally banned in my house because my mom hates it so much that she will not allow it to
you know
be.
what's funny,
So now I have a house.
Haley?
I'm going to bring him over. I should put it on. That's a great idea, Shane.
So, not gonna lie, knowing both your parents, that doesn't surprise me at all. But there you go. But that is a wrap here on another episode of Welcome to the Wasteland. But Haley, Patrice, and Rod, thank you all so much for coming on and talking movies with me.
Always a pleasure, Shane.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.